Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are going to go ahead and get started. So for today's topic, we are going to be talking about tools, and more tools, and specifically tools for identifying potential solutions. So today, we are going to just jump off and begin with our welcome. My name is Jeanette Ball, and I am joined today by Robin Vandermoor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. We're excited to have the opportunity to engage with you all again, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
So we want to get an idea of who is on the line, and so using our chat function, if you wouldn't mind telling us your name and anyone else who's in the room with you, and what organization you're from. So it looks like we have Andrea from St. Joseph County. Welcome. Welcome, Shirley from Fort Wayne. Ooh, lots of people are coming in. Welcome, Roxanne. Hi, Ben from Elkhart. Looks like we also have Amy from Nurse Family Partnership and Nicole from St. Joseph County. Hi, Lynn, also from St. Joe. All right, so it looks like that is who is on the line with us. So a couple of housekeeping things just to kind of kick us off. So the first is we want to hear from you. If you have questions as we're going through the material, please do not hesitate to ask them. We have the chat function that we are watching, and we are happy to answer any questions. If you have any experiences with the different tools that we're going to talk about, especially as they relate to the QI work that you and your team are doing, we'd love to hear that. So we encourage you to share any sort of experiences that you have. Right now, your microphones are muted. They were muted upon entry, but we have opened up the function that will allow you to unmute yourself. So if you would like, instead of using the chat, to just unmute yourself and provide some thoughts around the particular tools or some thoughts around the work that you have done, feel free to unmute yourself and share with us that way. We have already been engaging some through the chat box. We will be asking a couple of discussion questions throughout the webinar. So we encourage you to use this chat box and again, share any questions that you have. We do ask that you share all of your questions and comments with all the panelists and attendees. So if you look down towards the bottom of your chat box, there's a little section that says to with a little down arrow. So we just ask that you select all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your questions and your input. Lastly, we are recording this. So if you have team members who couldn't make it today, we will be sending out this recording along with the PowerPoint and the handouts that we will reference today so that you guys will be able to share with those who couldn't be here today, or you guys will be able to go back to this webinar as you were implementing some of the tools. So hopefully it'll help you along the way. So we will go ahead and jump in and get started. So for today, we are going to be exploring tools for brainstorming potential solutions. And this will really build off of the webinar that we did last week. Next, we're going to discuss the steps for selecting a solution. So after you have implemented those tools, kind of those next steps, how do you really narrow it down? And then lastly, we're going to engage and learn with one another, which is where we would really like to hear your experiences in using these tools. So to start us off with, the first discussion question that we have is, what tools and/or processes have you used in improvement efforts to brainstorm potential solutions to the root cause of a problem? And again, feel free to use the chat box, or if you would like to unmute yourself, we'd love to hear from you. All right, so Amy says that the fishbone with open discussion and brainstorming are tools that she has used in the past. Thank you, Amy. What about others? Have others used tools in the past, specifically with their improvement efforts, that help brainstorm potential solutions? All right, I'm not seeing anything come through, but maybe once we go through these, it might jog your memory and you'll be able to share some experiences with us. Oh, Lynn said fishbone and affinity diagram for solutions. Thank you. So we want to start off with just talking a little bit about the importance of using a tool for brainstorming potential solutions. So the first reason is really that it helps to identify all the potential solutions to the problem based on the root cause. So really it allows for the opportunity for you and your team members to really think outside of the box and have that creativity when it comes to developing those solutions that can address the particular root cause that you all decided to focus on. It also allows for the review of model or best practices to help identify potential solutions. So whether that is talking to other organizations or other agencies to see what they have done, or maybe doing some research to see what best practice methods are out there, really taking that time to see what others, what other solutions others have used can be helpful when the team is working to develop their own solutions. And lastly, doing this will allow you to pick the best solution and the one that is most likely to help you accomplish your aim statement. And the aim statement is that original goal that you set out to reach when you are starting out with your QI project. So we are going to go ahead and jump on into tools to brainstorm potential solutions. And the first one that we are going to start out with is the Affinity Diagram. And this one might look familiar to you, as it's a common one that is used in quality improvement projects. So the Affinity Diagram allows the team to really generate a large number of potential solutions. It allows for an opportunity to do individual brainstorming and then coming together as a group and coming to consensus. It also allows you to organize all of the different solutions that were identified into natural groupings. And then lastly, it helps to understand the potential solutions to the problem. So here we see a picture of what an affinity diagram looks like when it's constructed. But what we want to do is take you through an example of one.
And Jeanette, if I might add something really quick, for those of you that chatted in saying that you have some familiarity with the fishbone diagram and have used that in the past, a lot of times the fishbone diagram and the affinity diagram are paired, and they pair really nicely because with the fishbone, you are brainstorming root causes to the problem that you have at hand, and you're landing on one root cause to address through your improvement efforts, and really taking that root cause to this next step of thinking about potential solutions and using an affinity diagram to brainstorm potential solutions to that particular root cause is really a beautiful way to use both of these tools. And my guess is that for those of you that mentioned some familiarity, that's probably stepwise how you've been working through this process, which is fantastic.
Perfect. So let's take a quick look at the step-by-step process for creating an affinity diagram. So to begin with, we encourage the team to really phrase the root cause that they have selected as a full sentence. And really, in doing this, you have this one idea that everyone is focused in on, and then they're able to brainstorm specific solutions based on that one root cause that you all have selected. You should encourage the team to be creative and really think outside the box. Once the group has come up with the brainstorm specific solutions, the next step is to sort the solutions into related groupings. So really focusing in on, is there a common theme that links particular solutions together? Once those solutions have been grouped together, you can then create a summary or a header that really sums up those solutions. Really, you want to strive to capture the essence of all the solutions in the grouping. So you want to make sure that header really encompasses all of them and that a solution isn't being left out. Lastly, as a team, you're going to want to debrief on the affinity diagram and then select a solution to test through your PDSA cycle. So let's walk through this example. So again, the group will start with brainstorming, and for this particular affinity diagram, the team decided to focus in on the root cause of program participants are not keeping their scheduled appointments/visits. So individually, they brainstorm solutions and then they put them all out there. So some solutions included discuss family goal plans as part of regular ongoing supervision, establish and utilize a family goal planning protocol, set short-term and long-term goals with participants and revisit them at least every other appointment, and then a couple other solutions that came up from other team members. So again, the purpose of brainstorming is to establish that common method for a team to creatively and efficiently generate a large number of specific solutions. We really want people to think creatively and think outside of the box. So now that the team has all of their potential solutions listed here, the next step for them will be to take the solutions and start grouping them. So which solutions have similar themes and relate to each other? This will allow them to group them in columns. So for example, in this first column, we have create a participation charter/agreement consisting of expectations of program staff, participant, and what they will do together. Next, there is explain screenings used to access participant or to assess participant needs and discuss results with participants. And then check in with participants regularly, asking, how is the program going for you? So the team really felt like these three solutions were all aligned. They all had that same theme in common. And how they labeled these was that they felt all three of these determine and set expectations early and regularly assess needs. So they organized them into those natural groupings, and then they wrote out that header to help really understand the theme that went between all three of those. So now that the team separated all of the solutions out into their groupings, they gave them headers, descriptive headers that really help them pull out the theme of what the solutions in each of the groupings meant. Now they need to select a solution to test. So after the affinity diagram has been created, it's really important that the team take a moment to really discuss all of the solutions that are there. Now, we have a handout that could help you all as you work within your teams and your PDSA cycles. So we encourage you to refer to the handout for some sample discussion questions. After you guys have a discussion reading through those questions, we encourage you to highlight or circle specific solutions that the team really feels should be considered for testing. So these are really the solutions that are within your scope. It's the solution that the team can really impact and feels could really make a difference to address the root cause that they're focusing on. So in doing this, you'll also want to prioritize the solutions and consider which solutions are easy to test and would make a big impact. What would maybe be easy to test but would make a small impact. Which solutions would be maybe a little bit more difficult but would have a really big impact. And then lastly, what is hard to test and what would make a small impact. So really just helping the team narrow down specifically which solution should we really try and focus on. And then finally, you all will determine the solution through this consensus conversation. And remember, we really encourage you only to select one solution at a time. That way the team will know that testing that solution made this much of a difference towards reaching their goal. Sometimes when we test multiple solutions, it's really difficult to see which solution really impacted that problem that you're trying to address. Questions about what we just went through about affinity diagrams?
I think one thing that I will add as everybody's thinking about this information and digesting it is that when you're using an affinity diagram, you know, one of the beautiful things about using that quality improvement tool is that you brainstorm a very large number of potential solutions that you could work with. And I would encourage you all, as you use this tool, to think about keeping the work that you did with a particular tool for that improvement effort as a living document that you can go back to, because as I'm sure some of you have had this experience, sometimes the initial solution that you try out doesn't work as you expected, and perhaps there are some parts and pieces that work great, others that don't work as well, or sometimes the solution just doesn't work at all and you have to kind of go back to the drawing board. And so, you know, you don't have to start from square one again. You can really start with what you already have and use that to inform future improvement efforts. So would encourage you all to think about too, as you're working with these tools within your teams, how you can ensure that they're documented in a well-rounded way that you could go back to them and test another solution as you continue to tackle the challenges that you have at hand for the particular topic areas that you're working on.
All right, so now that we've talked about affinity diagrams and recognize that it's one of the more common tools, for those of you who have used an affinity diagram, what experiences have you encountered when using this tool?
I'll throw something else out there to kind of get some of the conversation around this generated. Oh, Amy says, helpful, allows for team input and discussion. Fantastic. What else works really nicely with this particular tool from your experiences? Lynn says the tool focuses on solutions, which is particularly helpful. And Ben shared that he hasn't had the opportunity to use the tool before. This is a new one. So that's fantastic, Ben. We'll look forward to hearing how it goes if you give this tool a whirl at some point. Has anybody encountered challenges in using this tool that would be good for us to talk a little bit more about during our time together today? I think a lot of times quality improvement tools seem fairly simple to use when you are learning about them and looking to other people's experiences, but then when you dive in and try to use it yourself, sometimes it can feel a little bit more challenging when you're taking a group through the process. So if anybody's run into any challenges in that way and are willing to share, that would be fantastic for us to spend a little bit of time chatting about here together today. Perhaps we don't have too many people on the line who have had an opportunity to give this particular tool a try, which is okay too. Okay, hearing nothing, I'm going to go ahead and move us into the next tool. But if you have some thoughts, don't hesitate to share them through the chat, and we can always revisit them as we continue to go. Oops, sorry. So the next tool that we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about is the tree diagram. This tool we actually spent some time talking about during our webinar last week as a fantastic tool to use for working through root cause. You'll note here that we're adding to it this week and showing you how you can also use this tool for brainstorming potential solutions. This tool is set up really nicely to think through both aspects of the process of moving from identifying root causes to that solutions-oriented conversation. So we're going to build off of our conversation last week with this tool and talk about the solution portion. So the tree diagram really encourages teams to think through and consider potential solutions to specific root causes that come up on that particular tree diagram. So the idea is that instead of brainstorming like you're going to do with the Affinity Diagram, a bunch of solutions to one root cause, you're actually going to spend time thinking through each branch of the tree that you landed on. So each of the main root causes that you landed on and then worked through minor root causes, you're going to then spend some time brainstorming potential solutions that could address that root cause of the problem. This tool is neat in that it really supports teams in easily connecting each aspect of the challenge at hand that you're working on. So making those connections in a really logical way. So thinking through the problem, the root causes that are weighing most heavily on that problem, the minor root causes that are buried within those main root causes, and then leading to solutions. So if you are working within a team or with a team that could benefit from having that very stepwise diagram and image of your work together and your thought process, this might be a really neat tool for you all to use. The other thing that's cool about this tool, which we talked a little bit about last week, is that it's really built in a way that you could potentially very easily run multiple PDSA cycles that build on one another. So you could start with running a PDSA cycle that's focused on one root cause, and if you really address that in a good way, you could move to addressing another root cause, because we know that typically with challenges that we have at hand, there's normally not just one fix that needs to be put in place. A lot of times we have to test out and try different things until we find the right solution or solutions to really streamline that process that we're working to overcome challenges with and find a more efficient, standardized way of carrying out that process. So this part of the tree diagram of using it is actually pretty easy, because what you want to do is you want to begin with the tree diagram that you started when you were assessing the root cause. So you'll essentially have a tree diagram, if I pop back for a moment, that has your problem statement on it, the main root causes that you came to, and the minor root causes that you worked through. And you'll then take that and build out this solution piece as a team. So you start with the diagram that you have, and then the next step is really to build out those potential solutions. So spend some time thinking about actionable solutions for each root cause branch of the tree. And it can be helpful to ask a question of the folks that are engaged in that brainstorming process, something along the lines of what could be done to improve or overcome this particular branch of root causes, and center people and remind them what those root causes are, so that they're thinking about all of the causes that are sort of playing into that major root cause that you have identified as a team. So spend some time brainstorming those solutions, document those solutions by adding them, again, to the tree diagram. I'll go to the example here in just a moment. So you're going to add your solutions in over to the branches that you've already created through root cause. And then you're going to spend some time reviewing and discussing that tree diagram. We talked about this last week, but as with any tool that you're using for your improvement efforts, you want to make sure that you spend some time digesting that tool as a team and thinking about where that takes you next in your journey. So let's go to an example, because that always helps make things a little bit clearer. So this particular tree diagram, the problem statement is families are not receiving the number of home visits that they should. And the team thought through the major root causes. So those are in those purple boxes. What they came to was the procedures for scheduling visits are inconsistent across home visitors. Families are not prioritizing the home visiting program, and procedures for reminding families of their home visits are inconsistent. So one of the things you'll notice right away, if you weren't part of the webinar last week, is that the major root causes that come up here are very specific. They're not broad categories like they are on a fishbone diagram. So this really gets you to a point where you're digging very deep into each root cause so that when you're coming up with solutions, they relate back to that particular branch of the tree and the major and minor root causes that fall within that branch. So let's take a look at this last branch, for example. So the procedures for reminding families of their home visits are inconsistent. The team broke that particular major root cause down into two minor root causes, one being a standard process for reminding families of home visits does not exist, and two being that families have different needs for timing of reminders and method. So they spent some time talking about this particular branch and thinking about what are some potential solutions we could test to help us work on this challenge that we have at hand that's feeding into the problem that we have of families not receiving the number of visits that they should. So the team came to 3 different potential solutions that could be tested. One was utilize a reminder app to send reminders the day prior to the scheduled home visit. The second was text the family 2 days prior to the home visit to remind them of the appointment and time. And the third was provide families with a calendar tool to note their upcoming home visit. So they landed on 3 different potential solutions that could be tested for that particular branch. And a question that often comes up is there a right number of solutions that we need to have for each branch? There's not. There isn't a hard and fast rule around that. My recommendation would be that you capture all of the unique solutions that team members come up with for each branch of your tree diagram. So you could have a couple, you might have a handful. The number doesn't matter as much as you all feeling comfortable as a team that you have thought very carefully through that particular branch of causes and truly consider the different ways you could try something a little different out and see how it works and impacts your process overall. So just like with the affinity diagram, you want to get to a place with your tree diagram where you are selecting a solution to test. So you would want to go back to the tool handouts, which we'll be sharing with you, that include all of this great information that's also in this presentation. And really think through where should you start? What branch are you going to start with? And again, using those great prioritization questions that Jeanette shared along with the affinity diagram in terms of which solutions are easy to test and would make a big impact. Easy to test, but maybe make a small impact. So working through, kind of thinking through that logically. Many times with a tree diagram, there actually is sort of an order of operations that needs to happen in that there is a particular branch that you have to tackle before another one. So sometimes that is very evident and the team can probably fairly quickly come to a consensus on where to start, which branch to start with. You might, depending on the number of solutions that you've brainstormed for that branch, have to have some discussion about, you know, which solution do you think would make a big impact and be easy to test. That might be the place to start with testing out a solution, but you'll have to likely have some conversation around that. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you are landing on one solution to test for the improvement effort, the PDSA cycle that you're embarking on. You don't want to test more than one at once so that you can really ensure that your learnings are related to that particular solution and you know how to tweak moving forward, or revisit your tree diagram again and make some or revisit your tree diagram again and decide what to maybe tackle next as you move forward, working to fully address the challenge that you have at hand. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions about tree diagrams before I lead us into our, I don't know why this is moving forward so much, lead us into our last tool that we're going to talk about today. Has anyone had the opportunity to use a tree diagram in your work before? Amy says she hasn't had the opportunity to try this out. Ben shared that no questions yet, but really thinks that this kind of visual will be a great one to work with the staff that he's working with. That's fantastic, Ben. Well, again, if you think of any questions or have any thoughts to share about this one, please feel free to share them as we continue to move forward in our time together today. So last but not least, we have a third tool to share with you, and that is a prioritization matrix. This particular tool is one that really helps a team narrow down, brainstorm solutions to the root cause of the problem by really working through a systematic way of organizing those ideas. An affinity diagram definitely has some systematic organization that goes along with it, but we know that one of the things sometimes teams have challenges with when working with an affinity diagram is really figuring out how to best prioritize the solutions that you have generated as a team with that particular tool and land on one to test. This particular tool can really help you do that. So if the team that you're working on or the team you are leading you anticipate might have some challenges coming to consensus, this might be a tool to try out using as a team with a large number of brainstormed potential solutions. Because like an affinity diagram, the first step, which you'll see here in a few moments, is spending some time just brainstorming potential solutions to the root cause of the problem. So that piece of it is still intact and there with this tool. It just, when it comes to actually organizing, you are going to use a little bit of a different setup to do that. And really, this particular tool, the prioritization matrix, encourages the team to focus on a solution that is both easy to test and can make a big impact. So that you are hopefully increasing your chances for success in working toward overcoming that problem that you have at hand. So I'm going to move us forward. Into how to set a prioritization matrix up. So the first step is, as a team, you really want to come to consensus on root cause if you haven't already. Hopefully you did at the end of your root cause analysis, and you want to state your root cause as a full sentence and be sure that you have consensus on that so that the team is brainstorming potential solutions around the same root cause and has a shared understanding of what that cause is. And then step two is really just spend some time brainstorming specific solutions. Don't hesitate to be creative and think outside of the box. It's really important to keep the team's sphere of influence in mind while you're doing this. A lot of times we are working with processes or encountering challenges that we don't have complete control over. There are things that are within our sphere of influence and then outside of our sphere of influence, and really considering solutions that you as a team can test to make a difference with the challenge that you have at hand are things that you want to focus on here. And always, when doing a brainstorming process, if you can use some kind of structured brainstorming process to facilitate that piece, that can be particularly helpful in generating creative ideas that could be tested. So a lot of times what comes along with that is providing individuals with some think time on their own, then giving individuals time to perhaps maybe share in smaller pairs, and then coming back together as a large group to share out ideas and ensure that all of the unique solutions that folks come to make it up in the final list of solutions that you could consider to take forward to this prioritization matrix that you're putting together. So step 3 is really sorting all of those brainstorm solutions into the matrix. And let me go back. So the matrix has, as you probably noticed, 4 quadrants. It's set up so that from top to bottom, you're thinking about easy to test, hard to test. And from left to right, you're thinking about would make a small impact all the way to would make a big impact. And the different quadrants are where you would then place your solutions that have been brainstormed. So in the top right quadrant, that's where ideas or solutions that you've brainstormed that are easy to test and would make a big impact would be documented. For solutions that are easy to test but wouldn't maybe make as big of an impact, would be a smaller impact, you would want to place those in the top left quadrant. In the bottom left quadrant, that's where solutions go that are hard to test and would make a small impact. And in the bottom right quadrant, that is where solutions would go that are hard to test and would make a big impact. So this will help the team really sort the solutions that you come up with into the various places where you can then make a decision on what to prioritize first. And again, you're really thinking about that top right quadrant where there are solutions captured that are easy to test and would make a big impact. And of course, again, you want to spend some time discussing the matrix and eventually coming to consensus on what specific solution you are going to test through your Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle. So let's go to an example to bring this to life. So in this particular example, you can see at the top that the root cause is caregivers need more knowledge and support to read, sing, and tell stories with their children every day. And you'll note that there are several different solutions that made it into this prioritization matrix. I'll share a couple of them. So one of them that's in the easy to test would make a big impact is program staff establishes and utilizes caregiver-friendly activity forums to support caregivers in practicing language and literacy skills with child between visits. Another solution that came up in this team's brainstorm that would be hard to test and would make a small impact is that program staff establishes and maintains a directory of key community early language and literacy partners and or resources and the services they offer to share with families. Something the team came to that they felt would make a big impact but be hard to test would be program staff provide caregivers with feedback on observed early language and learning interactions at every home visit. And something that they thought would be easy to test but wouldn't make a very big impact is that program staff describe communication related milestones to caregivers and support caregivers in understanding the importance of these milestones to overall language development. So you'll note that the solutions again here are very specific, they're actionable, and the team spent some time really thinking about both the ease of being able to test that particular solution and the impact that it would make on the problem that they have at hand. So with a prioritization matrix, a lot of the prioritizing work has really been done for you because you've spent time sorting those potential solutions into the various quadrants that fall within that particular tool. So really what you want to do is spend some good focused time as a team looking to the quadrant, again, that has the easy to test, would make a big impact ideas, and consider the solutions that you have at hand there and decide on which solution you would lift from that matrix and test as a part of your improvement effort. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you might have about this particular tool, or if you have thoughts about using this tool in your work. Okay. Well, Ben just shared that he has used a prioritization matrix quite a bit, and the trick was really to stay focused on it. It's not as great of a visual as the tree diagram, he thinks. Thanks, Ben, for sharing that. And again, we'll be really interested to hear what your experiences might be with the tree diagram if you have time to give it a try. The tree diagram is kind of neat because it's a one-stop shop for working through a couple of different parts of the process, and does really, in a very clean way, make some clear connections for the team. So once you've selected a solution, so used a tool to work through the process of brainstorming potential solutions to the root cause or root causes that you have come to as a team for the problem that you have at hand, where do you head next? What do you do next once you have that solution? Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to develop an improvement theory to test, which is basically really a fancy way of saying developing a hypothesis that you are going to take forward and try out on a small scale. The if-then approach is a really nice way of stating that in a succinct way that folks can then really go forth and test that particular solution during the do stage of the PDSA cycle. So when you're developing an improvement theory, you want to make sure that you use the if-then approach. That approach really capitalizes on using baseline data, making sure that you are addressing the root cause, ensures that you are thinking about something that is within the team's sphere of influence, and ultimately you want to have an improvement theory that can be tested on a small scale. So something that a home visitor can test with a family, or maybe something that could be tested during 1 week with a couple of families, something that you keep pretty small in scale, because remember, it's an experiment, you're trying it out. So you want to use the if-then structure for stating the solution that you're going to test. So if we do such and such, so whatever the solution is that you're lifting from either your affinity diagram, your tree diagram, or your prioritization matrix that you used, then we expect such and such to happen, which the then portion is linked directly back to that SMART aim statement that your team has come up with. So the goal that you're looking to accomplish through your improvement effort, there should be that clear connection. So let's talk about an example, because that always helps bring these concepts to life. So if we look at the example that we have here on the left, the problem statement the team was working with was families are not receiving the number of home visits that they should. They set an aim statement of by September 2019, the program will increase the percent of families who receive the number of home visits they should from 50% to 75%. They identified a root cause of a standard process for reminding families of home visits doesn't exist. And they decided to test the following solution. So they said, if home visitors utilize a reminder app, so for example, something like App 22, to send reminders the day prior to the scheduled home visit, then the percent of families who will receive the number of home visits they should will increase. So again, here you can see that the specific solution that they're testing out is directly linked to the root cause of a standard process for reminding families of home visits does not exist. It's also linked to the problem that they identified that families are not receiving the number of home visits that they should. And the result of testing this solution and seeing how it works directly links to the team's overall goal, their aim statement of increasing the percent of families who are receiving the number of home visits that they should. So when you're kind of looking back on the plan work that you do during the plan portion of the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle, you should see this alignment. And this is really a good check-in point because after this, you're really going to go forth into the do stage and test. So at this point in time, all of those key pieces of plan work that you have worked through should be well solidified and should all have some good connections and threads that run through them. If you run into a situation where it's hard to see those connections, that would be a good point in time to just go back and revisit some of the work that you've done to make sure that those clear connections are visible before you dive into testing. When you're testing, just like I alluded to before and provided a couple of examples with, you want to keep your testing simple. So think about starting with low-hanging fruit, something that is simple or obvious that you can test to improve a process. A lot of times, those low-hanging fruit solutions exist for the challenges that we have at hand. And those can be great places to start because they lead to quick wins. And if you can have some quick wins as a team, that increases excitement around improvement efforts, gets staff on board and bought into using methods and tools to work through improving different aspects of your programming, and can really be a win-win for the program overall. You really want to keep your tests simple in the way of how broad they are too. It is not necessary to test a solution with every staff member in the program or have every staff member test something with every program participant. You don't really want to do that because thinking back to just sort of the key concepts of doing improvement work is you're testing something, you're trying it out, and you want to try it out on a small scale because you don't know if it's going to work or not. You don't know what tweaks you might need to make along the way as you learn more about the process that you're working to improve and what you're really learning through testing. So the smaller you can keep those tests, the quicker you can have some learnings that then you can act on, the better. So don't be afraid to test out on a really small scale. Also, don't be afraid to go forward and try something out. You do a lot of work during the plan stage of the PDSA cycle, and sometimes when you get towards the end of the plan stage, that can lead to the team second guessing yourselves. It can sometimes lead to some paralysis of, oh, I don't know if we should really move forward. We might really need to investigate this. Trust your instincts. Know that nothing that you're doing necessarily has to be permanent, and go forward and try something and see how it works. And then you'll be able to make some really well-informed decisions about how to move forward from there. So just remember, keep it simple. Okay. I'm going to pause there and check in and see if anyone's willing to share some thoughts that you might have about how you will apply what you've learned here today. Does anyone think they'll try out a tool right away? And if so, which one are you looking to test out? Oh, Ben says that he thinks keeping testing simple is a great point because many times we overcomplicate the situation. Yeah, that can be so easy to do, especially when you are in this work and doing all of that careful planning. Definitely don't need to overcomplicate it, and you should feel very comfortable just trying something out and keeping it very simple. I mean, you saw in the example that we just shared that they were literally trying out an app for reminding folks of home visits. Like, nothing complicated, very simple. Thanks for sharing that, Ben. And it sounds like Ben is thinking that his team might give the tree diagram a whirl and see how that works. That's fantastic. Lynn says they're going to give the tree diagram a try as well. Great. Really look forward to hearing how that goes for all of you. One thing that I'll say is that if you have any further questions as you dive in and try these tools out, don't hesitate to get in touch with Jeanette or I. Both of our email addresses are on this final slide deck, and we'll also share that out with all of you following the webinar with the PowerPoints, the link to the recording, as well as the tool handouts that we've shared. And we are going to do our best to make sure that those actually reach everybody that registered as well as everybody that was in the initial email list for this particular webinar. Are there any last questions before we close out our time together today? Okay, well, we can't thank you all enough. We hope that this was helpful. And again, we look forward to hearing about your experiences using these different tools for brainstorming potential solutions. And we wish you best wishes in your quality improvement efforts. Thanks so much for your time and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.